Hello and welcome back to my channel, Ask Nolan. Today we're going to be discussing another sixth grade topic. This topic is unit rate. So this is like an introductory lesson to help build some foundational knowledge on unit rate. So that way, and you'll be able to answer any questions they ask you about unit rate. So let's go ahead and jump on in. What is unit rate? All right. So first, we need to know that a unit rate is a ratio, a special ratio that tells us how much for one. So it could be for one item, 1 hour, 1 mile, and an hour for 1 hour, that's a unit of time. So the other words, other units of time could be seconds, right? Minutes, days, years, right? Weeks, months, and so forth. All right. Just to give a few examples. All right. So let's make that look a little better. So months. All right. Now, mile is a way that we measure distance. So instead of saying for 1 mile, they could say for 1 yard, uh, kilometers, inches, centimeters, uh, meters, okay, feet. So it doesn't have to just be 1 mile. If the units are in yards or the units are in feet, then it would be for 1 mile. But ultimately, a unit rate tells you how much for one, whatever that one is that they're referring to. Let's take a look at some easy examples. So, uh, first easy example is 5 apples cost $10. So that means that there's $2 for one apple. So the unit rate is $2 per apple. The next one, you read 20 pages in 4 minutes. That means 5 pages in 1 minute. So the unit rate would be 5 pages every minute. Okay. Um, C says 3 pencils cost $6. So that means that $2, it's $2 for one pencil. So the unit rate would be $2 for each pencil. Okay. Now, how do you find unit rate? Because that's another thing we need to know. You know, it's good to know what unit rate is, but how do you find it? You find it by dividing. Okay. You just divide to find out how much for one. All right. Uh, and remember, unit rate means per one or for each one or for every one. Okay. So most of the time they're going to use the word per. But sometimes they might also use for each, or they might also use for every. So if you see the phrase for every or for each, they're still referring to unit rate. All right. Let's move on. Now, another thing to pay attention to is that order matters when dividing to find the unit rate. Okay. So here, let's take a look at this first example. This first example, A, it says we have 6 apples cost $12. So on the left side, we have cost per apple. On the right side, we have apple per cost. So when the language tells you the order in which you divide the numbers. If we're trying to find the cost per apple, then it would be 12 divided by 6, which is 2. So it would be $2 per apple. But if the language was apple per cost, then it would be apples divided by the cost. So it would be 6 divided by 12, which is 1/2 or 0.5. So that would mean that it would a half of apple would be $1. Okay. However, when we do this, the correct unit rate that we're going to be referring to for this one would be this side over here. Whenever we do unit rate, we want to know the cost per apple, the cost per minute, the cost per week, the cost per item. Okay. So most of the time, I can't think of one off the top of my head. And that's why I want to say most and not every, but most of the time, the dollar amount goes on top. Okay. Cost is always the numerator, and then you divide by the second number. All right. Let's take a look at another example. We have example B says 100 miles in 4 hours. So remember, the whole point of all this is to emphasize that order matters when you're dividing to find a unit rate. So if the unit rate said miles per hour, then we would do 100 divided by 4, which is 25. So it would be 25 miles per hour, okay? But if the unit rate was hours per mile, then we would be dividing the 4 divided by the 100, which is 1 over 25. So it would be 1/25 of an hour for each mile or per mile. However, when we do unit rate, they always want it in miles per hour. Okay? All right. So, last thing to remember. The word per tells you the order. So if the question says they want to know the cost per item or dollars per item, then you do the dollar amount divided by the items. If they want to know miles per hour, then you do the miles divided by the number of hours, and that'll tell you the miles per hour. So per is a way to remember what the order is when you divide. All right. I'll see you all later. Check out my other videos on unit rate problems to see if you can apply this knowledge here to actual questions. See y'all later.